These are 10 things I wish I knew before I started playing Raft. Hi friends, and welcome back to Raft. You might say that I've played a little bit of this ocean floating simulator, and I've learned a lot about the game in the process. When I started out, I relied pretty heavily on some friends to teach me how this whole survival thing worked and how to actually play the game. If you want to play alone, or if your buddy is a bit of a bumbling idiot, then you may want a little more guidance in the early game, as that is most certainly the hardest part of the Raft journey. So I'm here to be your shining lighthouse above the endless waves. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It would be much appreciated. But without further ado, let's talk about 10 things I wish I knew before playing Raft. Before you even load into your first Raft world, you're already presented with a seemingly innocuous choice that will drastically alter the way you experience this endless ocean, and that choice comes in the form of selecting a difficulty. Technically, there are 5 game modes in Raft. Creative mode isn't truly a survival mode as there are no enemies, no hunger, and no thirst. Everything is already unlocked and building is free. Your raft also doesn't move and there's no trash, so only consider this mode if you're looking to build up a blueprint of a raft you'd like to recreate in survival. The 4 real difficulties are what really change things up. For all of these difficulties, a few things scale up as the difficulty increases. So for instance, hunger and thirst decay the slowest in peaceful and the fastest in hard. The same is true with the enemy damage scaling up the harder the difficulty. Beyond those general rules, each game mode comes with its selected features, like the way that enemies don't attack in peaceful, so Jeremiah is more friend than foe. In easy, you can respawn with your inventory intact, so even if Jeremiah does attack, you won't lose anything in the process. In normal worlds, you'll lose 2/3 of your inventory, and all tools will lose 2/3 of their durability as well. Hard is definitely the hardest mode though, and it is a lot more nuanced than the other 3 difficulties. Not only do your hunger and thirst decay faster and enemies deal more damage, but you also deal less damage to those same enemies. If you're not playing with a friend, this mode is also functionally a hardcore mode because you can't respawn without someone to carry you back to a bed. If you made this mistake though, don't worry, there's a subreddit dedicated to helping people out. Additionally, you have a small chance of spawning in an additional shark whenever you kill one in hard, meaning you can have up to 5 sharks at once, which does make things a bit more interesting. Just be aware of which difficulty you select and use it to enjoy your playthrough in a way that best suits your style, even when the game descriptions don't tell you that much. Once you've figured out which world difficulty is right for you, it's time to start actually trying to survive. I say try because if you were anything like me, I died, and I died a lot. The central part of that early survival is built on a flimsy plastic hook that will gather all of the riches held by the ocean, but to reel in those riches, you need to wield the hook effectively. The little circle used to charge up the hook affects how far the hook will go, but so will the angle you throw it at. This is where a little trigonometry comes into play. Throwing the hook at the water results in a throw that goes pretty much nowhere. Conversely, throwing it at slightly more than a 45-degree angle means that you can catch even the furthest bits of debris with good timing and a little aim. If your aim whiffs a bit, don't bother reeling in your hook with nothing on it, just retract it immediately by right-clicking. Upgraded hooks do technically throw further and reel faster, but more importantly, they are way more effective underwater. It is 100% worth the materials to get a scrap hook and not just tough it out all the way with a plastic hook, although technically there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Now that you've gotten your hands on a nice supply of flotsam and have built up a tidy collection of those baseline resources, you're probably looking to advance your world a bit, and for that, you need a research table. This might seem like a huge investment in the early game, but you're definitely going to need it. This simple little table took me an embarrassingly long time to understand, so here's the basic rundown. You put a raw resource into the research section and click the research button. It then unlocks that item as an understood item, so you'll never have to research more than one of any given thing. You'll also need to craft some of the mid-tier resources and research those too to make the more advanced things, so hinges, bolts, batteries, and other things need to be researched to progress. Now while a decent amount of stuff can be unlocked via this method, if you want to show off your fancy items and start the story, you need to research blueprints. The first 2 blueprints you'll get from floating barrels after the 15-minute mark, and every other blueprint is found at a certain story location in a set location. Ironically, the blueprint is more of a memorized recipe than a true blueprint, and the instant you've picked it up, it serves its entire usefulness and you can just yeet it straight back into the ocean. That recipe is now stored in the research table for you to unlock. Sometimes you'll have already researched the necessary components and can just click the learn button to get your fancy new item. Other times you'll have to research something else to get it. And if for some reason the thing you want to unlock isn't showing up, try scrolling back to the top because boy, that little bar is deceiving. Aside from the research table, the smelter is probably the most important thing to have on your raft, especially in your early game. Not only is it necessary to unlock the vast majority of crafting recipes, there is literally no way to progress with the story without it. That being said, most players will wait 3 to 4 islands before they realize what all of that sand and clay scattered around the bottom of the islands are for, when in reality, getting this whole process started should be one of your first priorities. About 5 of the 10 potential starting islands have enough sand and clay to make a single smelter, which if you want to put in the effort for is more than worth it. You'll need 14 of each sand and clay, which can then be crafted into wet bricks, which then need to be physically placed onto your raft to dry before you can use them. This takes 5 minutes and is wildly confusing if you didn't already know what was happening. I'd recommend having multiple basic smelters as fast as you can get your hands on them, because you'll be needing a whole lot of metal if you want to make your life easier. One of the primary things that prevents your life from being super easy until you get your smelter factory up and running is the shark, whom I affectionately refer to as Jeremiah. The conventional and permanent way to protect your precious foundations is to fortify them using the armor from the build menu. Jeremiah can bite through walls, he can bite through roofs, he can bite through detail planks. Basically, if the edge of a foundation is touching the water and not fortified, it can be attacked and will be destroyed. If that piece happens to be a collection net, you can technically pick it up and put it down if you're fast enough, and it won't lose health. But that's not exactly consistent or easy. Instead, let's take a brief look at how shark attack priority works. Like we said, only edge pieces matter, so the interior is safe. The interiors of the edge are also safer, but not entirely so, as they have about a 5% chance to be attacked. Corners, however, have a 30% chance to be attacked. And then the further out a given piece is from your original raft center, the more likely it is to feel Jeremiah's wrath. Early game, you can use this to your advantage by making something I like to call the sacrificial foundation. Basically, you want to make a triangle foundation off the side of your raft and let that take all of the rage, because it only costs 1 plank and 1 plastic to make, which is infinitely cheaper than constantly trying to repair a piece that isn't worth that much more. You can always make a cheap little row of foundations with a triangle on the end to all but guarantee the safety of your raft until you get your hands on enough metal to protect 1 square that sticks out with 4 in between, like so. This design is also shark-proof at a fraction of the cost and will prevent some of the frustrations until you can afford to even out the shape and fortify the whole perimeter. Honestly, the hardest part of surviving in Raft is the first half hour, and the hardest part of that is keeping up your hunger and thirst, especially if you choose to play in normal or hard. I've done a deeper dive on the nature of these 2 stats already, but the gist is that Raft operates on a craving system where the hungrier or thirstier you are, the more valuable food is to eat. Cooked foods are always more valuable than raw foods, and whatever you do, unless you are actively dying and cannot wait the 100 seconds for your beet to cook, do not eat it raw because you are wasting something that could potentially give you a much better payout. If you're really pressed for resources, it's the best idea to wait until your bar is almost at that critical level before eating to get the best bang for your buck. This may seem like a no-brainer to anyone who's familiar with Raft and has played it any time since it came to Steam in 2018, but if you were only following the game when the likes of Jacksepticeye played the first demos in 2016, you may not know that many of the most important resources are actually underwater. This is important because islands are basically set maps where everything is predetermined, and certain islands will always have certain things. The only randomized aspect is which islands you get. There are 10 small tropical islands and 4 large tropical islands. There are also some other biomes, but frankly they aren't all that useful, nor are they all that different from the tropical ones. Small islands are the bread and butter of your raft experience, and learning to harvest them is a good way to advance your journey. Large islands are a bit more fun though, because that's where you can find fun animals to keep you company, both passive and aggressive. This is also where you can find trading posts, which will unlock a lot of both fun and useful items. Also found on large islands are the vast majority of direct threats to your survival in the form of things that want to physically deal harm to you. There's the terrestrial boar, which you can sidestep pretty easily when they charge. Underwater, there's Jeremiah, of course, and he is pretty simple if you use a spear to stab him when he opens his mouth, or just use shark bait. Around large islands, you'll also find poison puffers, which will explode and poison you if you get too close, so this is where a bow comes in handy. A bow is also necessary for everyone's least favorite enemy, which is the screecher. These large birds will drop rocks on your head for fun, but fortunately they won't hit you so long as you keep running. From there, it's just a matter of shooting them enough times so that they fall out of the sky instead of the boulders they seem to be so fond of. On story locations, which I'm attempting to avoid spoiling, there are also a number of unique enemies, but none of them require too many special strategies that aren't apparent from one of the other threats you've already faced. For the most part, these enemies are safely ignored, so don't feel like you need to spend too much time bringing all of them down. It's a common misconception that as the main character in your own playthrough of Raft, your world should revolve around you. And that's where you're horribly wrong, because the main character is the one and only thing in the title. your raft. The entire world revolves around these little 4 squares that give you your first refuge. From where islands appear to how the trash spawns, everything is dependent on this little area. Earlier we talked about how you can use your hook to catch everything within the trash stream, but let's be honest, unless you're a god gamer like me, some things are gonna pass you by, so you want to build a row of collection nets. That row of collection nets should span about 28 squares, centered on the middle of your 4x4. But if you didn't know this and ended up building the bulk of your raft, let's say 5 squares to the right, all of your trash will always go 5 squares to the left of where you decide to build, which is really annoying if you want things to be symmetrical. Just be sure to mark where these original 4 squares are when you start out, because they can wreak havoc on you later. If you want to explore the vast world around you and bring your raft with you, you have a few options for what to do. Assuming you don't run into anything, your raft will always travel north. You can change that with a sail, which will slightly push you in whatever direction the sail is pointed towards, with the exception of going directly against the wind. That makes you stand more or less perfectly still. The sail doesn't make you go any faster, and only one sail has an effect, so you don't need 40 of them to go faster. That's what an engine is for, which is unlocked via a blueprint early in the story. Each engine powers 100 foundations at an additional 0.5 to 0.7 meters a second, but you'll never need more than 6 engines, so don't waste your hard-earned metal. But the most powerful item of all is the mighty paddle, which has the ability to get your raft out of any hard place you may have stuck it in. Just remember that going in the direction of the wind is always fastest, and your best bet otherwise is an engine. If you miss an early story location before you get an engine, don't worry, it'll respawn in front of you again if you go about 3,000 meters away, so you aren't at risk of losing your playthrough. And with that, we come to the end of 10 things I wish I knew before I started playing Raft. This game is deceptively complex under a simple style, and there are many nuances that can help make your journey more enjoyable. For me, these were tips that would have really helped my early understanding of the game, especially without my friends helping me. Of course, learning the game on your own is an entirely valid strategy, but it'll take some trial and error. Anyways, I think that's everything for me for now. I hope you enjoyed. Please consider leaving a like if you did, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps me out. I hope to see you all again soon, but until then, have a great day.